The stray children of the war smoke rose from the broken city like black rivers against a dying sky. The air was thick with dust and the smell of burned metal. Ethan Cole walked slowly through the ruins, his boots crunching over shattered glass. He was a mechanic once, before the war came, before the soldiers took everything that mattered. Now he just searched for scraps, anything that could be fixed or traded for food. He stopped near an old shelter. The roof half collapsed. A faint sound came from inside, like a whisper or a breath. He raised his flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the smoke. Two small figures crouched behind a pile of metal sheets, trembling. Their faces were covered in soot, their eyes wide with fear. Ethan lowered the light slowly, his voice soft. "Hey there." "It's okay," he said. One of the children hissed softly, her skin pale blue with faint glowing lines across her cheeks. Aliens, young ones, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Everyone in the colony had been told to stay away from alien refugees. The Empire punished humans who helped them. Ethan looked at them again, thin, hungry, shaking in the cold. He sighed, took off his jacket, and placed it near them. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "You're freezing." The older girl looked at the younger one, then reached out slowly. Her tiny hands clutched the jacket like it was treasure. He smiled weakly. "Come on," he said. "My workshop isn't far." They hesitated, but when the sound of distant gunfire echoed, they followed. Ethan led them through the ruins to a small metal hut hidden under fallen walls. Inside were piles of tools, broken machines, and the faint hum of an old heater. He gave them food, dry bread, can of beans, the best he had. They ate in silence, eyes never leaving him. When they finished, the smaller one spoke in a soft, strange accent. "Why help us?" she asked. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Because no one else will." That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the heater, watching the two girls huddled together under a blanket. He didn't even know their names, but he felt something heavy in his chest, something he hadn't felt since before the war. Hope, maybe, or purpose. Days passed, and he taught them little things. How to stay quiet when soldiers searched, how to fix a broken light, how to hide food. He found out their names. The older one was Lyra, the younger Mira. They had escaped when their family ship crashed, hiding ever since. Sometimes, Lyra asked questions about humans. "Why do you help each other when it hurts?" she asked once. Ethan smiled faintly. "That's what makes us human." One evening, red lights filled the streets. A patrol was coming. Ethan grabbed the girls and pushed them into a large cargo box. "Don't move," he whispered. Closing the lid, seconds later, the door burst open. Soldiers in black armor storming in. "Inspection!" One of them barked, his voice harsh through the helmet. Ethan stood still, hands raised, sweat cold on his neck. They searched every corner, breaking open crates, kicking tools aside. One of them stopped near the box where the girls hid. Ethan's heart stopped before the soldier could open it. Ethan coughed loudly and knocked over a fuel can. The soldiers turned, shouting, and a spark from a loose wire lit the spilled fuel. Flames rose, smoke filled the air, and the soldiers retreated cursing. When the fire was out and the soldiers gone, Ethan opened the box. Two terrified faces stared up at him, eyes full of tears. He knelt down and said softly, "It's okay. You're safe now." Lyra grabbed his hand, her small voice shaking. "Why did you stay, human? You could run." Ethan smiled tiredly. "Because I promised you'd be safe." The next morning, he fixed an old cargo shuttle, small and fragile but enough to fly. He loaded supplies and helped the girls climb in. "You'll head east," he said, pointing at the rising sun. "There's a refugee camp across the ridge. You'll find help there." Mira looked at him, eyes full of fear. "What about you?" He shook his head. Someone has to keep the patrols busy. The shuttle's engine roared weakly to life. Lyra reached out from the doorway, tears shining on her blue skin. "Teacher, will we see you again?" she asked. Ethan forced a smile. "Maybe one day, when the stars are kind." The small ship lifted into the smoky air, vanishing beyond the ruined skyline. Ethan watched until it became a speck of light, then disappeared. He turned back toward the burning city, his shadow long across the ash. The wind carried a faint echo. The laughter of two children, once saved by a man who refused to stop caring. He didn't know it then, but that act of kindness would echo through galaxies. And 12 years later, the stars themselves would come looking for him. The forgotten years. 12 years had passed since the night of the fire. The war was over, but peace had not reached the edges of space. Ethan Cole lived alone on a dusty mining world, where the air always smelled of rust. He spent his days fixing broken engines, and his nights staring at the stars. To the miners, he was just the quiet mechanic in the old hangar. No one knew that long ago, he had saved 2 children who were never meant to survive. His workshop was a mess of tools and half-dead machines. An old radio hummed softly while he soldered circuits together. Sometimes he talked to himself, pretending someone was listening. Other times, he imagined the laughter of 2 small girls echoing through the walls. He still kept a small piece of blue crystal that Lyra had dropped before leaving. It glowed faintly whenever the power flickered, like a heartbeat refusing to fade. One evening, a storm swept across the desert plain. Lightning painted the sky purple as the wind screamed through the hangar doors. Ethan sat by the heater, reading from a cracked data pad. The news spoke of royal wars, alien empires, and trade routes reopening. None of it mattered to him anymore. He had stopped caring about empires the day he lost his home. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind was still, he looked up and whispered, "I hope you made it." He didn't say their names, but the stars seemed to answer in silence. He wondered if Lyra and Mira ever thought of him, if they had found safety, or if they were just another story lost to space. A knock echoed through the hangar door, sharp and unexpected. Visitors were rare on this side of the colony. Ethan grabbed his wrench just in case and opened the door. A miner stood there, nervous and wide-eyed. "Hey, old man," he said. "Something big's coming from orbit. You better see this." Ethan stepped outside, the wind tugging at his jacket, in the sky above the desert. A streak of silver light descended through the clouds. It wasn't a cargo ship or a smuggler's craft. It was enormous. Royal-made, the engines glowed with blue flame, casting long shadows over the colony. The people in the camp pointed and whispered in fear. No one had ever seen a ship like that, so close to a mining world. The vessel slowed and hovered, its hull shimmering with strange symbols. Ethan's heart pounded as the sound of the engines filled the air like thunder. For a moment, he thought it was a dream. Then a deep voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "Citizen Ethan Cole, you are requested to remain where you are." The crowd scattered, hiding behind rock walls and cargo piles. Only Ethan stood still, his eyes fixed on the sky. The ship's landing lights turned night into day as it touched down on the plain. Dust and wind roared outward, shaking the ground beneath his feet. He covered his face as the storm of light faded. When he looked again, a ramp extended from the belly of the ship. Figures appeared at the top, tall, armored, glowing faintly with blue light. Their armor looked like liquid metal, their eyes bright like the stars. They were soldiers, but not human. Ethan's chest tightened as he recognized the faint patterns on their armor, the same glowing lines he had seen once before on 2 frightened children. One of the guards spoke, his voice amplified and formal. "Ethan Cole of Earth descent, by command of Her Majesties, Lyra Vorin and Mira Vorin, you are summoned aboard the Royal Starship Seraphis." Ethan blinked, unable to speak. The names hit him like thunder. Lyra and Mira, the orphan girls he had hidden 12 years ago. The soldiers stepped aside, forming a path to the ramp. Ethan felt the eyes of the entire colony on him. No one knew what was happening, but they all stepped back. The air was thick with silence and disbelief. He took one slow breath and muttered under it, "Well, girls, I guess you finally found me," as he walked toward the light of the royal ship. The crowd whispered. Some said he was being taken for judgment. Others said for honor, but Ethan didn't hear them. All he could hear was the faint echo of two young voices calling him teacher. And somewhere deep inside, beneath years of dust and loneliness, a small spark of hope came alive again. The royal starship. The ramp of the massive ship touched the ground with a heavy thud. A wave of hot air blew against Ethan's face, carrying the faint smell of metal and ozone. He squinted through the blinding blue light that poured from the ship's interior. For a moment, he felt like he was standing before a living creature, instead of a machine. Two guards stepped forward, tall and silent, their armor glowing softly with alien energy. Their helmets reflected his worn face, showing the lines of age and time. "Ethan Cole," one of them said, his voice smooth like polished steel. "By royal order, you are requested aboard immediately." Ethan hesitated, looking back at the dusty settlement behind him. Dozens of miners watched in silence, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. He gave them a small shrug and a faint smile. "Guess I'll be back for dinner," he said quietly. Though no one laughed, he followed the guards up the ramp, his boots clanging on the cold metal floor as the door closed behind him. The roar of the engines faded into an eerie calm. Inside, the ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls pulsed faintly with blue veins of light, and the air was warm and sweet. It was as if the ship itself was alive, breathing softly around him. They led him through long corridors, where alien symbols glowed across the walls. Every step echoed, every breath felt heavy. He couldn't stop glancing at the strange windows, stars drifting by like sparks in a dark ocean. His mind raced with questions, but his voice refused to come out. 12 years of silence had built a wall inside him. He never expected anyone, especially them, to come back. Finally, the guards stopped before a massive door carved with flowing patterns of light. One of them pressed his hand against a crystal pad. The door slid open without a sound, revealing a grand chamber filled with soft light. Ethan stepped inside slowly, his heart pounding like a drum. At the far end of the chamber, two figures stood near a large window overlooking the stars. Their long robes shimmered like liquid silver, and crowns of blue energy floated above their heads. When they turned, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He didn't need to be told who they were. He knew those faces. Even after all the years, Lyra and Mira, no longer frightened children hiding in the ruins, but tall, graceful, and radiant. Their eyes, one golden, one pale blue, still held the same warmth he remembered. For a moment, he couldn't move. They just looked at each other in silence, the weight of time between them. Then Mira smiled, tears forming in her glowing eyes. "Teacher," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan laughed softly. The sound cracked and rough. "You still remember that," he said. Lyra stepped forward, her expression calm, but her voice shaking slightly. "How could we forget the man who saved our lives?" she said, "and gave us a reason to believe humans were not monsters." Ethan looked down, unsure what to say. "I didn't save you for belief," he said slowly. "I just didn't want two kids dying in the cold." Mira wiped a tear and laughed gently. "And yet that small choice changed everything," she said. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Lyra raised her hand, and a hologram appeared in the air. A massive map of star systems. "This is the Voran Empire," she said. "And because of you, humans are no longer seen as prey or slaves." Ethan blinked, confused. "Me? I fixed engines. I didn't change empires." Lyra smiled faintly. "Empires change when hearts do, and ours did." They led him to a wide table where symbols floated above its surface. Images of humans working alongside aliens appeared. Scientists, pilots, engineers, all cooperating. Mira placed her hand over his, her skin glowing softly. "We told them your story," she said. "How a human risked his life for 2 lost alien children. Now they call you the human who defied fear." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "I just did what was right," he said. Lyra looked at him with a knowing smile. That's why it mattered. For a long moment, the 3 of them stood in silence, surrounded by the hum of the ship. Ethan looked out at the stars through the wide window, the same stars he had watched for years from his lonely workshop. And for the first time in 12 years, he didn't feel small. He felt seen, remembered, and somehow at peace. Then Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Ethan, we didn't just come to thank you," she said softly. "We came because we need you again." He turned to her, frowning slightly. "Need me?" he repeated. "For what?" Lyra exchanged a glance with her sister. "The Empire is breaking apart," Mira said, "and only a human heart can save it." Ethan stared at them both, the hum of the ship growing louder around him. He didn't understand what they meant yet, but deep down, he knew. His quiet life was over, and the stars had called him back. The reunion and the request. Ethan stood in silence, his heart beating slowly. The stars reflected in his tired eyes. Lyra and Mira looked at him, their faces glowing faintly in the soft blue light of the ship's chamber. It felt unreal. 2 little girls he once hid from soldiers were now standing before him as royal leaders. He wanted to speak, but his throat tightened. Words lost in the rush of memories. Lyra broke the silence first, her voice steady but full of emotion. 12 years ago, you saved 2 orphaned aliens from a human war zone, she said. But what you didn't know was that those orphans were heirs to the Vorin throne. Ethan blinked, the words hitting him like a wave. "Heirs?" he repeated. "You mean you were royal?" Mira laughed softly, shaking her head, her silver hair catching the light. "Not anymore," she said. "Not after what we did." Lyra stepped closer, her voice lowering. "We told our people the truth about you, about humans, about kindness. It was forbidden," Mira added quietly. "The old council wanted to erase your story, but we refused." Ethan frowned, crossing his arms. "Why would that be forbidden?" "I just helped a couple of kids." Lyra's golden eyes met his, burning with quiet anger. "Because to the Vorin, humans were nothing," she said. "Slaves, laborers, tools, never equals. But when your name spread, everything changed." Mira activated a small projector beside her. Images appeared. Humans walking freely in alien cities. Human scientists working beside Vorin engineers. "Your kindness started peace talks between our worlds," she said softly. For the first time, humans and Vorin worked together. Ethan stared at the images in silence, his hands trembling slightly. All those years of loneliness, all those nights staring at the stars, and he never knew. Lyra watched him closely, sensing his disbelief. "But peace never lasts long," she said, her tone darkening. "The old empire still breathes beneath the surface. A faction that wants the war back, wants humans erased again." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "So you came to me for what?" "I'm no soldier. I'm a mechanic." Mira smiled gently. "That's exactly why we came," she said. "Because you fix things, not destroy them." Lyra stepped closer, holding something small in her hand. The blue crystal he had once kept. He stared at it in shock. "I thought I lost that," he whispered. "You didn't," Lyra said. "It called us here." Ethan looked at the glowing crystal. The same faint pulse, the same warmth. "When you gave it to us as children," Mira said softly, "you told us it meant hope." He chuckled weakly. "I said that?" She nodded, smiling through tears. And now that hope needs you again. The ship shuddered slightly. As alarms flickered red across the walls, Lyra turned sharply, her calm replaced with command. "Report!" she ordered. A guard appeared at the door, his armor scorched. "Your Majesty, we're being followed. Unidentified ships closing in fast." Ethan's instincts kicked in immediately. "How many?" he asked, stepping forward. "3, the guard said. "Fast attack models. Possibly old Voron design." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "The Loyalists," she whispered. Mira turned to Ethan, her voice calm but tense. "They must have traced our jump. They'll try to capture you." "Me?" he asked, surprised. Lyra nodded grimly. "To them, you're a symbol. If they kill you, they kill the hope you created." Ethan shook his head, trying to understand. "I'm just a man," he said. "Nothing special." Mira looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "To us, you're more than that." The ship trembled again, as the sound of energy blasts echoed through the hull. Ethan turned to the nearest console, his hands moving on instinct. "Your engine couplings are exposed," he said quickly. "Reroute the power through the secondary core, or you'll lose thrust." Lyra blinked. "How do you know that?" He smiled faintly. "You forget, I'm still a mechanic." Lights flickered, and the ship groaned as he worked. For a moment, the alarm slowed, the hum stabilizing. Then the ship broke through the upper atmosphere. Stars rushing past like silver rain. Mira exhaled, relief flooding her face. "Still fixing things," she whispered with a smile. Ethan shrugged. Old habits die hard. The sisters looked at each other, then back at him. Lyra said quietly, "Ethan Cole, the man who changed an empire once by saving 2 children. We ask you now, will you help us save it again?" He looked at them both, the glow of the stars reflecting in his tired eyes. After a long silence, he said softly, "I'll help, but not as your symbol. As your friend," for the first time since they had found him. Both sisters smiled. Real smiles, full of light and memory. And as the royal starship drifted through the endless night, Ethan Cole, the forgotten human, once again stepped into the current of destiny. The mechanic who fixed hearts would now help mend a galaxy. The gift of a promise, the royal starship Seraphis sailed quietly through the void, leaving behind the shattered skies of the mining world. The hum of the engines was steady now, a soft rhythm that filled the long corridors with calm. Ethan Cole stood at the viewing deck, staring out into the stars. Each spark of light out there reminded him of something he once said to 2 frightened girls long ago. "Hope always shines, even in the dark." Now those girls were rulers of an empire, and he was their guest, their symbol, and somehow their friend. But in his heart, Ethan still felt like the same old mechanic, a man who fixed broken engines, not broken empires. He sighed quietly, watching the stars drift by. Behind him, footsteps echoed softly. Mira approached, carrying 2 cups of steaming liquid that smelled faintly of spice and smoke. "You've been awake since the battle," she said, handing him one. Ethan nodded. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Too much noise in my head." Mira smiled faintly. "You haven't changed," she said, sitting beside him. "Still worrying about everyone else first," he chuckled. "Old habit," he said. "Comes from being human." For a while, they sat in silence, the stars reflecting in their eyes. Then Mira turned to him, her expression soft but serious. "Do you remember," she asked, "the night you hid us under that old metal crate?" Ethan blinked, surprised by the sudden memory. "How could I forget?" he said. "You 2 were shaking so bad, I thought the whole army could hear your teeth clattering." Mira laughed softly. Then her smile faded. "You risked your life for us," she said quietly, "and you never asked for anything." Ethan looked down, tracing his thumb along the edge of his cup. "Wasn't about asking," he said. "It was about doing what was right. Mira nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. That's why we came back for you. Ethan turned to her, eyebrows raised. I thought you came back because your empire was falling apart, he said. She smiled sadly. That too, she admitted. But more because you gave us something no one else ever did. He frowned slightly. What's that? Mira's eyes shimmered like liquid silver. A promise, she said, and we intend to return it. Before he could reply, the chamber doors opened and Lyra entered, her presence commanding but calm. Preparations are ready, she said, her gaze shifting between them. It's time you saw what your kindness built. Ethan followed them through the glowing corridors to a large hall lined with alien banners. In the center stood a holographic display, a city floating above a blue planet, shimmering like crystal. This, Lyra said proudly, is Haven. Ethan stared, speechless. The city was unlike anything he had ever seen. Half human, half foreign architecture. Airships drifted between towers. Gardens grew under transparent domes, and light pulsed through the streets like living veins. Mira's voice broke through his awe. It's the first city built together by humans and Vorin, she said softly, and named after your workshop, the place where hope began. Ethan's throat tightened, emotion rising like a wave. You named a city after my junkyard, he said with a shaky laugh. Lyra smiled gently. It was never a junkyard, she said. It was the beginning of a future. He stared at them both, his eyes glistening. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. Then don't, she said. Just see what you started. The ship began to descend, and through the viewport, Haven came into view. Vast, glowing, alive. Human voices mixed with alien ones. Laughter filled the streets, and children of both races ran side by side. Ethan felt his heart ache with pride and disbelief. He whispered, So this is what peace looks like. Lyra nodded, her voice firm but filled with warmth. This is what your promise became. As the ship landed, crowds gathered below, cheering, waving banners that bore the human and Vorin crests. Side by side, Ethan stepped out onto the landing platform, the air cool and full of life. For the first time in years, he felt sunlight that wasn't from a dying star. The people bowed as the sisters stood beside him, but Lyra raised her hand, stopping them. Today, she said loudly, her voice echoing through the plaza, we honor not a king, not a hero, but a man who reminded us that mercy is strength. Ethan froze, unsure what to do as the crowd cheered. Mira turned to him with a bright smile. Welcome home, teacher, she said softly. He laughed quietly, his eyes misty. Home, huh? He whispered. For the first time in 12 long years, the word didn't sound empty. The Empire's apology, the morning light over Haven, was soft and golden. The city below the royal palace shimmered with life. Airships floating between towers, children playing in crystal courtyards, and banners waving with both human and Vorin crests, side by side. Ethan Cole stood on the balcony of his guest chamber, the wind brushing against his weathered face. It all felt too perfect, too peaceful, and yet he could sense something heavy in the air, like a storm waiting behind the sunlight. He turned when the door opened. Lyra entered, dressed in formal royal armor, silver threads running through her cape like veins of light. You didn't sleep again, she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. Hard to sleep when the universe keeps surprising you. Lyra walked closer, her tone quieter now. There's something you should know, she said. Something the council decided before we arrived here. He frowned. Council? The High Council of the Empire, she said. The same one that exiled us years ago. They've called an assembly and they want to see you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. See me? Why? Lyra hesitated, her eyes distant for a moment. To make things right, or at least to pretend to, she said bitterly. Later that day, the Royal Hall of Haven was filled with light and sound. Dozens of alien dignitaries stood around a circular platform, their glowing robes forming a sea of colors. At the center stood Ethan, dressed simply in his worn jacket, the same one he had worn the night he met Lyra and Mira. The crowd whispered among themselves, their voices sharp and curious. To them, this human was a legend, or a mistake that changed everything. Then the council doors opened, and 6 elders of the Vorin Empire entered, their presence commanding and cold. The eldest, with eyes like pale fire, stepped forward and spoke. "Ethan Cole of Earth," he said slowly, "your actions 12 years ago set into motion events that reshaped our history. You defied the laws of our empire. Yet through your defiance, peace was born." The hall fell silent, every word echoing like thunder. Ethan didn't move, his face calm but unreadable. He wasn't here for glory, and he didn't care for titles. Lyra stood nearby, her golden eyes burning with quiet pride. Mira watched too, hands clasped together, her expression full of emotion. The elder continued, "The Empire of Vorin owes you a debt that cannot be repaid, but we offer what we can." He gestured. An attendant stepped forward, carrying a small case made of crystal. Inside was a glowing insignia, the royal seal of unity, something never before given to an outsider. The elder's voice lowered. "This is the mark of dawn, a symbol of honor, given only to those who bring light where darkness once ruled." Ethan stared at it for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "I didn't do any of this for medals," he said quietly. The crowd stirred, confused. Lyra smiled faintly. Knowing exactly what he meant, the elder nodded slowly, his expression softening. "And that, perhaps, is why you deserve it the most." Mira stepped forward, taking the insignia and placing it in his hands. Her eyes shimmered, and her voice trembled slightly. "Teacher, this isn't just a reward," she said. "It's an apology. From an empire that once called humans nothing." Ethan looked down at the glowing emblem, feeling its faint warmth. "Then tell your empire," he said softly, "that it's forgiven." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the hall. Then slowly, one of the council members bowed, then another and another, until all 6 elders bowed their heads before the human mechanic from a forgotten world. The crowd followed, lowering themselves in unity. It was the first time in history that the Vorin Empire had bowed to a human. Lyra's voice broke the silence, clear and strong. "Let this day be remembered as the dawn of the new age," she said, "where no being is born greater or lesser, where kindness is the truest strength." The hall erupted in applause, light and sound filling the air like a rising storm. As the ceremony ended, Ethan stepped out onto the balcony with Mira beside him. The city stretched beneath them, glowing under the twin suns. "You changed us, you know," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "No, you changed yourselves," he said. "I just gave you a reason." She laughed quietly. "That reason was hope," he nodded, watching the sunlight scatter across the crystal towers. "Hope," he repeated. "That's the only thing worth fixing." As night fell, lights across Haven flickered on one by one, and high above the world, the stars began to shine again. For the first time in centuries, the Empire and humanity looked at the same sky, not as enemies, but as equals. The star that waited. The night sky above Haven shimmered with 1,000,000 stars. Each one burned like a small promise in the dark, a reminder that light always returns. Ethan Cole stood on the highest balcony of the Royal Tower, watching the stars in silence. The city below glowed softly, a living jewel of 2 worlds united by a single act of mercy. It had been weeks since the ceremony. The Empire had changed faster than anyone thought possible. Human engineers now walked side by side with Vorin scientists. Children of both races played together. learning the same stories. And across every screen in the galaxy, one name was whispered with respect. Ethan Cole, the human who brought the dawn. But to Ethan, titles meant nothing. He still woke up early, fixed small things around the palace, and argued with robots about spare parts. Mira often laughed, telling him that no matter how many worlds he changed, he would always be the same stubborn mechanic. And Lyra, ever the leader, often visited him late at night to talk about policies, trade routes, and hope. He never thought of himself as wise. But somehow, his words always made her smile. One quiet evening, Lyra joined him on the balcony, the cool wind brushing against her silver robes. "You never asked for anything," she said softly. Looking at the stars, Ethan shook his head. "Didn't need to," he said. "You two were enough," she smiled. A small, genuine smile that reached her golden eyes. "You gave us a future," she said. "Now we want to give you something in return." She held out a small metallic cube, glowing faintly with blue light. "What's this?" he asked. "A ship," Lyra replied. "Your ship?" He blinked, surprised. "Mine?" Mira appeared beside her, laughing. "We built it for you. With our own hands." Ethan stared at the sisters, in disbelief. "You built me a ship?" Lyra nodded, her voice warm. "Every traveler deserves a way home," she said. They led him through the hangar, where a sleek vessel waited. Its hull shimmered with both human and Voran designs. Strong, beautiful, alive. The name glowed faintly across the side. The star that waited. Ethan traced the letters with his hand, his voice soft. "You remembered?" he whispered. Mira smiled. "You once said stars wait for those who keep faith," she said. "So we made one wait for you." He turned to them, emotion tightening his throat. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. Lyra stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't say anything," she said. "Just promise us one thing. Keep looking up." He nodded slowly, his eyes shining. "Always," he said. "That's what humans do." The ship's engines came to life with a soft hum. The sisters stood together, watching as Ethan climbed aboard. Inside, the controls lit up in soft blue light, familiar and strange all at once. He sat in the pilot's chair, his reflection visible in the polished glass. Older, wiser, but still carrying that same quiet fire. Through the communication link, Lyra's voice echoed. "Where will you go?" Ethan smiled, his hands gripping the controls. "Wherever the stars need fixing," he said lightly. Mira's laughter came through the speakers. "Still a mechanic," she teased. He grinned. "Always will be." The hangar doors opened, and light from the twin suns poured in. The star that waited lifted slowly, rising through the golden sky. Crowds below cheered as the ship climbed higher, engines roaring softly like a heartbeat. From the balcony, Lyra and Mira watched with tears in their eyes. Their teacher, their friend, their human hero, returning to the stars that had once called to him. As the ship broke through the clouds, Ethan looked down one last time at Haven. The city shimmered below. Alive, peaceful, free. He whispered softly, "Guess I finally fixed something that stayed fixed." Then he reached forward and engaged the jump drive. In a burst of blue light, the star that waited vanished into the endless night. Out there, among the stars, stories began again. Of a human who changed an empire with kindness, of two alien sisters who remembered their promise, and of a single mechanic who taught the galaxy what humanity truly meant. Somewhere, deep in the void, his voice still echoed, calm and proud. "Keep the fire burning, even when the stars grow cold." And so they did, for the galaxy would never forget the man who brought light where darkness once lived. The man who made hope eternal, Ethan Cole, the star that waited.